Now, everything was peaches and cream until black buyers began to set their eyes on the white Atlanta neighborhood called Mosley Park. And it's right here on the map. It's just west of Ashby Street. This community had a 38-acre park, a super large swimming pool, a clubhouse, and a 3-story elementary school. So in the 1930s, blacks started inching their way towards this direction. And as they did, the whites kept their eyeballs locked on them, watching their every move. So to find out what took place afterwards, we need to continue from the 2005 book, White Flight by Dr. Kevin Kruse. Unity. But most of them, 40 out of 46, had saved enough money to purchase their own homes. Those homes were by far their largest investment, and their neighborhood a prized possession. The them refers to those who identified as white in Mosley Park. They were mostly skilled and semi-skilled blue-collar workers who worked hard to buy these homes. All of the authorities in their lives insisted that the presence of blacks would destroy both. Why? Because their understanding was that blacks would tear up any neighborhood they lived in. And by them simply living in the neighborhood, the property values would plummet. So everyone, including the VA and the FHA, insisted that blacks would undo everything they worked so hard to get. When blacks began taking over blocks of Hunter Street to the east, for instance, white residents convinced the city to change the name of their part of Hunter to Mosley Drive, so they could avoid the stigma of having a black address. You see the importance of a name? The whites knew they had to change that name quickly, lest it be associated with the blackness. Whites living in a black neighborhood meant a drop in status. They knew other whites would think to themselves, "Oh, why would Susan and Mark live in a black neighborhood? There must be something wrong with them. Their finances must not be looking too good. Or they're setting their kids up for failure." That's the downgrade they knew was coming. So they changed the name quickly to avoid the stigma of living in a black area. Now listen to this. There was this veteran of the rich complexion who decided to build a home near the border, but on the black side of it. And even that made the whites very uncomfortable. They tried to get his building permit revoked, and when that didn't work, they tried to use the church. The pastor repeatedly called the young veteran, begging him to build elsewhere or, at the very least, turn his home around so it would not face Mosley Place. And what else? When that approach failed, 50 residents banded together to purchase the lot back from the black owner in order to keep them off the street, as one of them later put it. Those negotiations fell through, but yielded an unexpected result. Scott informed them that
Negroes would pay much more for these lots than the whites thought they were worth.
This is key right here. Money and profits were now a factor. So some whites began seeing new gates open with opportunities. Thus, unable to remove Scott, some whites instead decided to remove themselves, placing their homes on the black real estate market. In other words, they sold out their community. This was why those racial covenants were so useful, because they stopped other whites from breaking the code. If they tried to sell to Negroes, then the community could take them to court and block the sale. And the reason why they needed that legal protection was because there was too many whites who were willing to sell out when the profits were involved. And that's due to the increased emergence of the individualism entity. But once the U.S. Supreme Court in 1948 said that racial covenants were no longer enforceable, then you get more whites doing what the Turners did here.
I feel like they have a right, that this is a free country. I did not object to colored people building there on their property. They owned it.
But Just as she claimed Scott had a right to stay there, Maybelle Turner asserted her own prerogative to sell and leave.
I did not feel like I wanted to be there and be a fence to protect other people.
She said, I'm out of here. Y'all can deal with the problem. And the reason why what she did matter so much is because it only takes one or two whites to sell out before they eventually lose most of their community. Soon thereafter, the Turners listed their home with a black real estate agent, starting a domino effect along Mosley Place. Here we go. Ogletree next door at 1406 Mosley, salesman John Ogletree and his wife Ethel quickly listed their house with a black broker. Margaret Hall of 1416 soon followed suit.
Mrs. Turner and Mrs. Ogletree were selling their houses to colored people. I knew no white person would buy mine.
That's the domino effect. Panic starts kicking in because they start thinking the property values are plummeting. And they're panicking because they don't want to be stuck in the neighborhood. Which means what? Lower status, like we talked about earlier. So it starts to become a race to get rid of the homes. In response, some whites tried to keep their neighbors from selling.
Well, they had committees come down and suggest that we stay down there and be on the fence and let the colored live there. They said they didn't blame me, but that they wished that I wouldn't sell being down there and stay and protect them.
They wanted to throw her under the bus. They wanted her and her husband Ed to be on the front line like an infantryman. And she wasn't having it.
Nope.
The Turners realized, however, that their neighbors only wanted them to stay on the front lines of defense because they feared blacks would then become their next-door neighbors. That's a terrifying thing to the white consciousness.
I told them that if they objected so much to me selling, they could move on down there to my place, but they didn't want to do that.
That's a good point, Ed. If they were so concerned about it, then let's switch places and that will resolve the matter. But they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to be the talk of the community. You know, Dan and Mary lived 2 doors down from the N-words? It couldn't have been me. They must not care that much about their kids' future. Oh, snaps, this stuff is wild. While some whites pleaded with their neighbors, others tried intimidation. Chief among these was Ramsey Allen, a bricklayer who had lived at 1433 Mosley Place for 14 years. Allen wasn't trying to give it up. Pay attention. Although the white 2-story house belonged to his elderly in-laws, Allen was as fiercely protective of the neighborhood as any homeowner. He argued with John Calhoun in August 1948 and William Scott in October, but finally decided to take his case directly to the whites who betrayed him by showing their homes to blacks, which is exactly what he should have done. Don't get mad at the Negro for buying something that's for sale, because if it wasn't for sale, he wouldn't have bought it in the first place. You see how simple that is? But when you have people that sell out for profits and betray the community, then you need to speak to them because they initiated the problem. So Mr. Allen went on over there to the Turners and a couple other whites who were selling, and he used threats to stop them from selling since he couldn't use the courts. But they weren't budging. Each of them quickly sold their homes to Negroes. This was in 1948. Now, in 1951, blacks moved in more fiercely as more whites became more willing to sell. The black realtors stuck together and they held out their advertisings for the area until they had a majority of owners that were ready to sell. Now, on the first Sunday of September 1951, the black realtors met their threshold and they were now ready to sell. Here we go. The next week, the pages were nearly filled with listings there. In 2-column photo spreads with half-inch banners, the Alexander Callaway Real Estate Company announced,
"Let us help you purchase a beautiful home in the Mosley Park section."
Oh, Ramsey Allen was hurt when he saw this. I know he was hurt. In all caps, too? I know he was hurt. Agents encouraged all of Black Atlanta to drive through the neighborhood, browse its streets, and attend open houses.
"These homeowners want to sell. They are friendly people who want you to stop, look, and call us for an appointment."
The whole region was up for grabs, they promised. It sure was. An already heavy load of listings grew heavier as white homeowners further south rushed to put their property up for sale. That's the domino effect kicking in. You didn't want to be the only white left in the community. It's over with. It's time to give it up. Blacks were moving in, and the supremacy entity requires a distance to be maintained to continue the feeling of superiority. So it was time to pack it up and leave.
Whites panicked, and many became anxious to sell to get the top dollar while the getting was good.
Remember T.M. Alexander, then president of the Empire Real Estate Board and an active realtist himself. Uh-oh.
One Sunday, while driving a black client around, a white lady stood out, motioning to us excitedly to
Come look at our house.
By early October, entire rows of homes on Mim Street and Westview Drive were likewise listed for black buyers. By the end of the year, the realtists and bankers had secured the sales of most of the property around Mosley Place. Finally, on January 2nd, 1952, moving day, all the black buyers arrived together to take possession of their new homes. This stuff is wild. But this is showing you the history and events that amplified white exodus to the suburbs. They didn't just mysteriously wake up one day in suburbs like Marietta and others around the major cities. These here were the kind of events that accelerated their movement out there. And there's going to be more on this, so pay attention because it's all tying together on how they adapted their language and their approach. Okay? So right now, I want to thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.